I've prepared some exercises for the hips, specifically if you're having challenges with tightness and soreness, stiffness in the front of the hips. So what I've got with me today is a small towel or pillow or blanket for under my head. I've also got a second small towel, like a hand towel, which can be folded like so and be placed under the low back. And I also have a TheraBand with me. So we'll start laying on the back. And when you get down on your back, just notice if you have any tension in your neck rather, shoulders, neck or shoulders. And if you feel any tension there, just putting a small pillow or a folded blanket underneath can help the ribs to soften into the mat and relieve some of that tension. And then also just notice if there's any discomfort in the low back. And if there is, you can take your small towel and put it in under the lumbar. I also sometimes just like to use this towel because it feels comfortable. So even if you don't have discomfort, feel free to play with that. So we're laying on our backs and we're going to notice that the pelvis and the ribs and the head are sinking into the mat. We're just going to float the right leg up to tabletop. Notice as we do that, the sacrum is going to stay heavy on the mat. And then we'll lower this leg down. And we'll float the left leg up to tabletop. And we'll lower that leg down. As the right leg floats, think about the thigh bone gliding back and down into the hip socket, sinking deep. And then we'll bring that foot down. Left thigh bone glides back and down into the hip socket, visualizing that glide. And then we'll bring that leg down. Let's add our breath. We'll exhale as we float. And we'll inhale as we lower. Exhale as the leg floats. Inhale as you lower. Check in with the neck and shoulders. See if they're soft and remind them that they don't need to help you. And then also just check in with the low back. And as you're floating the legs, notice if there's any movement through the pelvis. So you should feel the contact with the low back on the towel, and you're not arching away, lifting the low back away from the towel. And you're also not rounding your low back, bearing down into the towel. Okay, from here, let's float the right leg up and let that right shin be heavy. And you can either use your hand on top of your knee, or you can use a TheraBand behind the thigh here. If you've got a TheraBand, or you can substitute like a towel or a strap, a belt. Feel your elbows connecting with the mat. That'll help the shoulders to soften. Shin is heavy, and think about the thigh bone sinking into the hip socket. And then we'll start to draw circles about the size of, I don't know, my knee's making maybe the size of a dinner plate, maybe a little bit bigger, definitely a little bit bigger, I think. Just play with that. But imagine like you're stirring a bowl of soup with your thigh bone. See if you can allow the hip muscles to relax even more using your hand or TheraBand to really guide this movement. And breathe as you move. Good, and then we'll pause. We'll bring that leg down. Let's bring the other leg up. The more that you're able to keep the pelvis quiet as you do this, shin is heavy, elbows on the mat, and you can start stirring your bowl of soup. The more the pelvis is able to stay quiet, the more this movement's going to happen right in the hip socket, which is our goal for today. Continue breathing as you stir. See if you can release the hip a little bit more. Let's do one more here. Good. We'll let that release. Let's bring the feet down. Keep the TheraBand close by. Now we're going to press into the right heel and start to slide that leg long away from you until the leg is straight. When you get to the bottom, inhale and grow long from crown of the head. As you exhale, invite the ribs to soften onto the mat and then slide that leg back in. Let's try that again. We'll inhale. Exhale, press the left heel into the mat as you slide out. Helps if you have some socks on. Inhale, grow long. Exhale, feel the ribs get heavy to the mat. And now like you're suctioning the thigh bone back into the hip socket and then bending that knee back in. Inhale to prepare. Exhale, pressing into the right heel, slide. Shoulders soft. Inhale, grow long. Exhale, ribs heavy. Suction thigh bone back into the hip socket, and then we'll slide that leg back in. Inhale to prepare. Exhale, pressing into the heel, sliding out. Inhale, grow long from head to heel. Exhale, invite the ribs to soften, suction thigh bone back into the hip socket and slide that leg back in. Now, if you're doing this and it feels pretty good, you can take your TheraBand and wrap it around your foot. And you can use as much resistance as you want here. So you can sort of play with it. Elbows are going to be on the mat and heel is on the mat. Collarbones are wide, so I'm almost like feeling my shoulder blades sinking as though I'm in warm wax, and I'm noticing my pelvis is in neutral, so I can feel my sacrum is heavy and my low back isn't bearing down into the towel. And then I'm going to do the same thing. Slide that leg out against the resistance. Inhale, grow long. And then as you exhale and slide in, don't let that resistance carry you in. Resist that resistance back in. Inhale. Exhale, press into the band, lengthening, connecting with the back body. Inhale, grow long. Exhale, sliding back in. So when I say back body, I'm thinking like the thigh area, like right where your bum and back of the thigh meet. Inhale here. Exhale, that's where we're going to derive this movement from. And notice that there's this connection between that sit bone and the heel. See if you can find that connection. Sliding back in. Let's do one more on this side. Inhale. Exhale, sliding out. Notice the ribs are staying heavy. Press. Resist that band back in. Let's switch and put that on the other foot. So I've got it wrapped around the arch of my foot so that my sock can still slide on my band. I've got my elbows in at the mat. And I'm feeling my shoulder blades and sacrum sinking into the mat. Pressing into the left heel, starting to lengthen that leg. Inhale, growing long from heel to head. And then as you come in, don't let that resistance band spring you back in. Resist your way back home. Working in both directions. Inhale. Exhale, press into the heel. That's also going to help you find that sit bone to heel connection. Inhale, growing long. Exhale, resisting the slide in. Inhale to prepare. Exhale, press and slide. As you inhale, feel the ribs expanding with air. Exhale, resisting that band coming back home. Let's do one more. Inhale. Exhale, press into that heel. Find the connection of sit bone to heel. Inhale, grow long. And exhale, resist that on your way back home. Okay, so we'll release that. We'll take the towel out from the low back and we're just going to roll onto our sides. Now, you may want to use your TheraBand for this. It's going to depend on your body. Laying on your side, and actually you can take that towel you had under your low back if you want and place it between your shoulder and head, if that's comfortable for you. And then with the hand, we're going to hold onto the leg. If the arm isn't quite long enough to reach, that's when you're going to take your TheraBand, wrap it around your shin and hold there. Thigh bone is parallel to the mat. And we're going to tuck the tailbone. So bringing like your pubic bone forward in space, rounding the lower back. You're going to feel that lengthen through the front of the thigh, and then press the press the foot into the hand, and then let that release. Tucking the tailbone, press the foot into the hand, breathe. And let that release. Let's do one more. Tucking the tailbone, foot presses into the hand. We'll let that release. Straighten that leg. We're going to just push up like we're getting out of bed, and we're going to swing the feet around to the other side, and we'll lay down using that towel between head and shoulder if that's comfortable for you. You can use this leg on the ground, feel it sinking into the mat to give you a little bit of stability, and either using your hand or your TheraBand, you'll hold on to that foot or shin. We're going to tuck the tailbone, pubic bone moves forward in space, and then press the foot into the hand. Feel that stretch tension increase, and then we'll let that release. Tucking the tailbone, pressing the foot into the hand, tension increases. Let that release. Tucking the tailbone, pressing foot into hand, and let that release. Good. We'll let that leg extend. We're going to roll onto our tummies now. And so this towel I've got under my head, I'm going to just use it under my forehead here for a little bit of support. And I'm going to flex my feet so my toes are tucked under. And take my hands, and I'm going to place my hands under my hip bone. You may or may not be able to feel your hip bones. It's fine either way. We're going to just use this, use the hands for a little bit of feedback. So once we're here, let's sink the hip bones towards the palms of the hands with maybe 10% of your effort. And hold here. Let's take a breath into the back of the ribs. And we'll exhale. One more time. Let's inhale into the back of the ribs. And exhale. We're going to build on here. So we'll inhale to prepare. Feel the pelvis sinking into the palms. And as you exhale, pointing the left ankle, straightening that knee, hover the leg. Pelvis is still sinking. And then lowering back down. Inhale to prepare. Feel your ribs expand. As you exhale, pointing the right ankle, straightening that knee, hovering the leg, and lowering down. Inhale to prepare. Exhale, pelvis sinking. Point the left ankle, straighten the knee, hover. When you get there, see if you can grow long from head to toe. Longer, longer, longer. Keep the pelvis sinking. And then keep that length as you lower down. Inhale, ribs expand. Exhale, pointing the right ankle, straightening the right knee, hovering the leg. Inhale, can you grow longer, longer, longer? Keep the pelvis sinking and lowering back down. Let's do one more on each side. Inhale. Exhale, pelvis sinks. Left leg floats. Lowering down. Inhale, back of the ribs expanding. Exhale, pointing the right ankle, straightening that knee. Pelvis sinks as we float the leg up and lowering down. Beautiful. Let's come to a standing position now, and we'll sort of play with these same movements in a standing position. So first, when we come to standing, just notice that the feet can be under the hip sockets. And so the hip sockets are sort of center of the thigh. And so a good trick for that is about fist distance apart. And then we're just going to lift the toes. And notice as you lift the toes, you can feel the 4 points of support under the feet. So behind the ball of the foot behind the big toe, the ball of the foot behind the baby toe, and then the 2 spots on the heel. And as we lower the toes, let's just keep the weight hovering over those 4 points. And then we're going to shift our weight to our right and drive our energy down through this pelvis so much that this opposite foot is going to lift. And we'll lower down. Noticing also shoulders over hip, ribs over pelvis. We're in this nice pillar of support, shifting weight. Drive the energy down. So it's the hip stabilizers allowing that foot to lift. We're not lifting with the low back of the leg that's lifting. We'll come back. You might notice as you keep the weight off of your toes, that balance is a little bit more tricky. And if that's the case, just use something to help with balance, because the goal is to get the hip stabilizers helping you while you're standing. It's not a balance exercise. And coming up, let's shift our weight to the other side. Notice the toes aren't clenching. We've got shoulder hovering over ribs, hovering over pelvis. Drive the energy down into the floor so much that this other foot lifts. And then we'll lower down. Shifting the weight, drive the energy down. Let's do 2 more on this side. Pushing. And 1 more, shifting the weight. You might notice a difference between the 2 sides. If you do, just notice that. Try not to create any stories about it. It's just really normal and human to have differences like that. Now we're going to pick up our TheraBand. If that's feeling okay for you, you can try wrapping the TheraBand around your left ankle. And you're going to take your right foot and you're going to stand on top of the TheraBand. And so checking in with your weight again, so you're able to lift and lower your toes. And we'll think about our pelvis as a bowl full of water. So the rim of the bowl is going to be around our waist, and we don't want to spill any water. So as we're going to shift our weight to that right foot that's standing on the TheraBand. As we bend this other knee and lift it up, we're going to try and keep the pelvis from spilling any water. Coming down. Another way to think about that too is if you think that of your tailbone having a little weight that's hanging down, and it's going to just stay hanging down. It's not going to swing forward and back as we move. And you can play with speed with this. I'm kind of going a little bit slowly because that's what my body needs for me to keep my balance. But your body might be different, so just play with it. And let's do 1 more, shifting the weight, driving the energy down so much that this foot lifts, and then we're going to lift against the resistance and down. Let's switch to the other foot. So we'll wrap the right foot around a TheraBand around the right foot. That'd be weird if we wrapped our foot around a TheraBand. And then we'll step the left foot onto the TheraBand. So thinking again of this alignment from head to toe, we've got shoulder over hip. Toes are able to move. We're going to shift our weight to one side and then peel that foot up against resistance. You might also notice a difference on this exercise from side to side. Don't worry about it. A good rule of thumb is that do the side that feels trickier first, do the side that feels easier second, and then go back and do the side that feels trickier for again. Back, whoops. You can also use something for balance for these too. Up. I don't know, I've lost count if that was 3 or 4, so we're going to do 1 more. And coming down. Excellent. So now we'll come off of that. And then we'll take the TheraBand. We're going to step the left foot into the TheraBand, and we're going to hold the ends of the TheraBand with our hands. And I'm going to turn my palms facing inward. And again, you can play with how much resistance you want. Shifting the weight over to the right foot. Toes are able to lift and lower. Weights over the 4 points of the foot. I'm going to bend my elbows in at my waist. Collarbones are nice and wide. And then push from the sit bone to the heel all the way down. So finding that connection, bending the knee in that we were playing with laying on our backs, pushing down, noticing the position as you push down. See if you can get that foot right in line with the other foot. So we're lengthening through the hip. Let me just turn to this side so I can show you what I mean. So just watching for this and seeing if we can get the legs in line. And then if that feels okay, whoops, tipping over here, we can press down, feel for the pelvis nice and quiet, and extend back and in and back and in, watching that the ribs stay over the pelvis, and back and in. We'll let that release. Ooh, shake out the legs. You'll notice your supporting leg is doing a lot of work too. If you feel that, that's normal. Let's put the right foot inside the TheraBand, and we'll shift our weight to the left foot. Elbows are in at the waist, and we'll bend the knee into our knee fold, thigh bone gliding back and down in the hip socket, and then we'll press that foot down, bringing the foot in line with your supporting leg, and up. Exhale, push. Inhale, up. Exhale, push. Inhale, up. Exhale, push. Let's pause here. Feel for the pelvis to be nice and quiet, and we'll glide the heel towards the back wall and forward. This doesn't have to be a huge movement. It's better to do a small movement, but keep the pelvis quiet. So that way the movements, you're getting the lengthening through the front of the hip, the strengthening through the back of the hip, and you're also letting the thigh bone glide in the hip socket. Back and in one more time. Back and in. Good. Let's let that release. So just to explain a little bit more why when we're on our mat and when we're standing, I'm talking about pelvis being quiet is because if as we move the leg, we're rounding the back, then the movement, I can keep my thigh bone in my hip socket here, and I can make it look like I'm moving. I'm not actually moving my thigh bone at all. And so when our goal is to get movement in the hip socket, we've got to keep the low back as quiet as we can. You might feel a little bit of movement because being human and all, but just do your best to notice how much that is happening. If the standing work is just a little bit too much for you right now, stick with the ground. And then when you're starting to feel a little more prepared for it, you can bring it to standing and see how it goes.